changeover. My very great pleasure to introduce Laura Candiotto from Pardubice and also Cagliari. We met 2 years ago, I think, in person, and it's a special pleasure to be able to introduce the concluding speaker of our Kindness Conference. Laura will speak to us about kindness and conviviality.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amber. I'm really so happy to be here. It was a fabulous workshop. I would like also to thank the Einstein Forum and all of you, because I can say that this gave me hope. Hope is a very important disposition for me, and the hope that we can really cultivate an epistemic culture of kindness, collaboration, participation. It was really, really amazing to have a taste of it. So please do organize more events like this, because it's really, really important. Yes, so today I'm going to talk about kindness and conviviality, and I would like to start with this reading. Crow's gift. A young girl had started feeding a large group of crows in her backyard each day, offering them tasty treats like peanuts and dog food. Of course, there is nothing particularly out of the ordinary about this kind of urban bird feeding. It was what the crows did that captured media interest. They started to bring a range of trinkets, from paper clips and buttons to Lego pieces, an earring, and even a light bulb, leaving these objects behind on the feeding platform. Were these things gift for this young girl, a kind of thank you? So this experience has been reported by Tom van Doren, a great philosopher, environmental philosophers working on the extinction crisis. And he was referring to an event that happened in 2015, and that apparently had a lot of resonance in the BBC and then in the social media, because this seems to be something quite peculiar. So we humans can gift to nature, offer stuff to non-human beings, but also they are replying to that in a way that might be perceived as a thank you. And so is this an act of kindness? So I'm very interested in what we can try to understand as ecological kindness. So really try to understand kindness beyond the human sphere, and especially in discussing some sort of interspecies relationality or interspecies care. And as a philosopher, although I am a romantic inside, I can say that I always try to ask me questions and address objections and really go into the opposite cases to see, but the situation is more complicated. And so I'm aware that very often gifts are unwanted. So, for example, as the cat that brings dead bodies in front of our doors, right? Or also there is this very famous story about Konrad Lorenz, who was training jackdaw, and this jackdaw was offering him everyday worms that he didn't want to eat. And at some point, he was putting these worms into his ears because the mouth was closed up, So these might be unwanted gifts. So are they still acts of kindness or not? What are they? Okay, so my suggestion is that we need something more than gifting for understanding ecological kindness in interspecies relationality. And I try to call this care. And this has to do with an ethos of kindness. So calling an ethos of kindness, I'm really thinking about, like an education of the character and cultivation of the character. So this, of course, does not exclude gifting and acts of generosity, because we know that very often kindness comes with generosity. It's an expression of kindness. But I really need to relate this to this exercise of our moral attention. So paying attention to the needs and desires of the other, so offering what the others really needs and want. Interestingly, about the case that I started is that the mother of the girl reported that these crowds, specifically one crowd, this is also interesting because it has to do with the problem of the individual, but there was one specific crowd that started to have an important bond with this little girl, and actually he really found also an object that the girl lost. And if this crowd found this lost object for her and brought it as a gift back. So this is pretty interesting to think about. Okay, so here it is the list of what I'm going to do today. I am aware that it's a long list, but I'm trying to keep it not too long, and so maybe I will skip some parts. Let's see how it goes. Okay, and so I'm not going to read you the list. We will go through it together, and let's see. Okay. So let's start with the conceptual framework. So, my conceptual framework is composed by different traditions, and I would like first to name enactive ethics. So here you can see some papers, some books that are related to that, but the gist, I would say, of enactive ethics is really that is understanding a moral relationship as situated and embodied, that have to do really with concrete others, meeting in concrete situation, and really stressing this idea of taking part to the life of the other. So it is a participatory ethics, and also the affects or the emotions, we can say, play a fundamental role in this kind of ethics, and is very practice-oriented. So here there is a very interesting dialogue between enaction and pragmatism, and I would say that pragmatism is really what leads to this practice-oriented approach. And Francisco Varela, just as a slogan, named enactive ethics as ethical know-how. So he says that it's a kind of mastery, expertise, knowing how to relate to a specific situation and to a specific other in order to reply to their needs and concerns. I personally connect enactive ethics to care ethics. I think that is very much needed. I'm not the only one that is doing that, but I would say that this is a line of research that needs more brains and hearts contributing to it. And especially if we think about responsibility, that is one of the core concepts and practice in ethics. These frameworks that combine enactive ethics and care ethics understand responsibility as the ability to respond to the needs of the others and the situation. So it's immediately relational. So it is not understood as a principle, as a law, as a duty, but it happens really in between, in the encounter. So there is this idea that good care is this responsive action, so being able to responding to the needs of the other. And in the background, there is also this conceptualization of relational identities. So this happened because relationship is really the starting point of ethics. And so also the moral agents, we can say, emerge out of the relationship. So, for example, for Nell Oddings, when we understand, the personal dimension of ethics is always the one caring for. And just using this for, caring for, imply the presence of the other. So it is not just one alone moral agent, The moral agent is the one caring for, and this for call immediately for the presence of the other there. And so for Maurice Hamilton, also try to understand the commitment. That is another very, very important concept and practice for ethics as commitment to care, commitment to relate in the best manner possible for this specific other. And Francisco Varela in this book also speaks in terms of selfless selves. I think that today I'm not going to talk about this, but it's very important to have a plural understanding also of the moral agent. Because if we understand this in a truly situated dimension, we can enact different ways of being moral agent depending on the situation. And this really includes this idea of plurality. So let's try to see how kindness can be understood here. So this is really like a tentative way because we don't really have much on kindness in this approach. So I'm trying to see, so using this conceptual framework, what might be the place of kindness in this approach. So I would say that kindness is a mode of moral attention and responsiveness. So the quality of the relation, the how. And so in classical terms, we can understand this as a virtue, or in a more contemporary pragmatist terms as a habit. Today I don't really care much about the distinction between these two. It's more like for me that, we can really start from this relational self and really focusing in the how of relating. And so kindness has really to do with this quality of relating. And here we have two quotes from William James. The first one is an open public talk to teachers, so I think that is very interesting. And he said that kindness is the habit of mind which is most easily formed when we act daily with regard for others' needs. Every small act of courtesy or helpfulness adds to the moral fund of the world. And in his book on the varieties of religious experience, he said that the saint's life is dominated by charity, which is only another name for kindness and benignity of heart. So what I like of these two quotes is, one, that this idea of kindness as a mode, as modality, is understood in its action-oriented perspective. So it has to do with acting daily. So it has to do with acts of kindness in this approach. So if you want, a virtue is a virtue only if it is enacted. So that is really expressed in this modality of being with others within this approach. And also, I really like that William James refers also to more classical understanding of kindness. So like charity, that charis in Greek, and caritas, that this is a very traditional way of understanding kindness. And they say, well, this, actually has to do with the goodness of the heart, the benignity of heart, the good willing, or also kindness. So in a way, I will say that here it really helps to broaden the spectrum, and in a way not being too fixated about one single word, but really try to convey the specific way of relating to the other. So in my understanding, this specific way of relating to the other has to do with listening. And so I will say that in order to enact this kind of responsibility as ability to respond to the needs of the others and the situation, we really need to learn to listen more and better. So this is really my tentative way of moving forward this enactive ethics approach. And I would say that this is required in order to be able to hear and respond. And in an ongoing conversation with Julian Tempone Wiltshire, we are working on deep listening together, where we are bringing together, the dialogical tradition in philosophy and the conversational model in psychology and relational psychoanalysis, and mostly in the existentialist approach, and showing how deep listening has this dual nature. So it is really required to have this attended to one's own listening to yourself, and this really open up to the listening of the other. And this is really what in a relational space, also therapeutic space, can create what we call this mutual dwelling. So the dwelling is really in between these at least two moral agents that are meeting and try to enact these ethics in relation. So in enactive terms, we can say that, sense-making, that is another key word of the enactive approach, emerge precisely in this space, in this mutual dwelling that is offered to the other, because also the way that you attend to yourself in a listening manner can offer this place of listening to the other. And well, to complete the conceptual framework, I would even add something from positive psychology, because I said, that the affective dimension is crucial for the enactive approach. And this, I think that if we create this dialogue between enactive ethics and care ethics, sometimes in care ethics, in my understanding, there is not enough support for the emotions per se, because they are understood more like as mere feelings, mere sentiments, and focusing more and more like a thick dimension of morality. But actually, positive psychology can show us the importance of positive emotions in precisely in broadening our action possibilities and also imagining otherwise, So this really has to do with this moral attention and moral imagination. And differently, from negative emotions that are understood as more, reactive attitudes, the positive ones as this possibility of opening up. And so I'm really trying to understand kindness as opening. And so certain positive emotions that are related to kindness, like affection, warmth, gratitude, interest, and joy, can support this opening. And in enactive words, this could be like can support positive affordances, So perceiving possibilities in the environment for growth. Okay, so this is the conceptual framework. I hope that it is enough clear. And now we go to ecological kindness specifically. And I will work through also the concept of kinship and conviviality through care. Okay, so here we have a quote from Nell Noddings. A society founded on care must encourage kindness, friendship, and attention to particular others. So I will say that stressing really the value of the particular others, the concrete others, the uniqueness of the other is one of the crucial points of care ethics. And kindness is seen really as really connected to really seeing and perceiving the other as really in the unique way of being. So it's really against this more universalized understanding of ethics, or also, kindness for all, or impartiality. So this morning we were speaking also about partiality in ethics. So I would say that here, this partiality is really seen as one of the key features of ethics, for really attending to the other in their true reality, as a concrete other, really appreciating their uniqueness. And this also implies that the relationality that is there is not necessarily symmetrical. So there is the idea that care is not necessarily reciprocal. And so, for example, and here I brought this book, Starting at Home, by Nell Noddings, the prototype of example of moral relationship is a mother and a child. And that is clearly asymmetrical, right? So there is this attitude of the one caring for the mother that is really needed to take responsibility, the ability to respond to a child, and the relation is not reciprocal, also in terms of power. Then there is this idea that, care needed to be free from expectation precisely to respect the other in their own terms, is essentially other-oriented. So we can connect this to what we were talking about, altruism, openness to the other, etc. And the response is really tailored to the specific being you are addressing. So it is not like a general recipe for the general public, let's say. So it's really in the specific encounter. So, this approach has been criticized in different ways, especially as, like a lack of political dimension. So it really works, in this very specific relationship at home, the mother and the child, and so, or the teacher and the student. But what kind of ethics more globalized can be envisioned through that? And so Joan Tronto tried to reply to that. And I can also read this quote where she said, democracy depends on the everyday kindness that sustains trust. So we can say that trust is seen as the glue that can combine acts of kindness together and can enlarge in this democratic society for Tronto. But, as I said already, there is also criticism of what can be called thin kindness. So here we have another quote. The ethics of care fosters the virtues of caring, empathy, compassion, and sensitivity rather than the mere kindness or benevolence that might be offered without understanding or involvement. So here, if you want, there is also this criticism towards, like ephemeral affection, something that can just come today or not tomorrow, or an act of kindness that can be used to soothe one's conscience, like, also in charity work has been studied, this problem of kindness, this feeling good giving. Still, since I'm working very much on the emotions and the positive emotions and how they can be really at the ground of this kind of care that is other-oriented, for me the point is not really like working too much in this distinction between thin and thick kindness, but really working with this ethos of kindness. So how the cultivation of character can be done through kindness. So it is not just, educating to kindness, but how kindness can be, the way to cultivate one's character. So I will say that it has not really to do with what we can call performative kindness, act of kindness, but specifically this quality of the character in relating to the other, in responding to their needs. So it is not just, this responding to the needs, but the quality of the character in responding to the needs. There is a subtle difference here that has to do with trying to understand this within an ethos, an ethical framework that can support kindness. Okay, and now let's go with a problem, because also in philosophy we like to try to address some problems and to see how this can challenge what we are suggesting and raise some objection and so on. And this is a real problem for me also, so I'm not just doing this as a philosophical exercise, so I'm very also interested in hearing from you and how would you reply to that and so on. And this is what I started to call the problem of the individual. And I can read these questions that kind of motivates my research into it. So if caring, is really so much grounded in this unique relationship with a concrete other, right? So could caring, this kind of caring that I'm describing, be extended to ecosystem and the earth, or is the care for essentially devoted to individuals? Is care bound to proximity? Could we look after another on a bigger scale? And what kind of reciprocity with the remote and the more than human? And assuming that the extension is possible, is it also beneficial, or we really miss something that is crucial about care? And so it will not be an act of care anymore. And then there is also this underlying question that I'm not going to address today, but is very important for me. And what if the more than human is the one caring for? Because this question are really rooted about assuming that is the human the one that is caring for in this problem. But we can have also a broader perspective that I'm not going to address today. So I think that from this question that I'm raising, you can see what are the problems here, right? So there is really the risk of missing the uniqueness of the cared for, or going to some sort of universalization in which we really cannot consider the concrete other. And so, all this care tradition really gives values to the individuals. But what happens when we try to extend this? Also acknowledging that these individuals are not interchangeable. Very often, especially when we think about non-human beings, or also in the examples at the beginning, we just think about birds, crows. And are we able to understand each of the bird as unique and not interchangeable, irreplaceable? And remember what I told you about this specific bond between one crowd and this young girl. It was this specific crowd that was looking for this item that the little girl missed, So the problem is really losing these intimacies that really seems to be at the ground, at the core of kindness. And so I will say that this is a real problem if we understand extension as scaling up. So let's try to use also some metaphors, some images that can help us, like really understanding this extension as a stairs, and with also the idea that the higher level is also the more important. So really working with hierarchies, right? This may be a problem in how we understand the extension, So. And now just trying to be aware of how we are thinking about the problem and see if the problem arises from how we think about this. So like the meta problem or the problem of the individual, okay? And then, of course, there is in the background this idea of universality as like, this umbrella term that takes all the particulars within, but without having them as part of. And working more with this principle of sameness that I was also talking this morning about how we understand kindness, like this idea that, yes, all these individuals are in a way one, meaning that they are the same. But this really fights with the approach of care ethics that is so grounded on the uniqueness and the difference of the other. And also this idea of the individual in terms of individualism. So I think that this is another layer and framework that can create more problems when we try to understand that. So I'm trying some ways to reply to this problem. And the first way is connecting kindness to kinship. And this is actually something that I'm very fascinated about. We can also discuss about this. But, there is the same root in kindness and kinship, at least in English, So to be of the same kind, to be kin, to be the same as belonging to the same family, So kindness is really related to this feeling of being part of the same family. Kindness has been defined as this mutuality of being. So family as, like this kind of mutual relationship within this sphere. But here I have to say, are we kind only to our kin? So if we do that, we really are reproducing this principle of sameness. So I would say that my problem with kindness here, understood as kinship, is really that we are working too much with the principle of sameness and not maybe integrating the principle of difference that I was arguing is crucial for care ethics and enactive ethics. And this might also relate to say, but I'm not kind only to my family members. Actually, there is also like this desire of being kind to strangers. But still, you see, there is this oppositional way, kin and strangers. And very often some studies show that this act of kindness towards strangers are just ephemeral, just for one day, and like an indifferentiated other, not the specific, unique being. Or, there might be also, this from a political point of view, we can discuss ways of including the stranger in your family. But this, again, is a way to remove the difference, right? So only if you became part of my family, you became kin, then I can be kind towards you. So this has to do also with problems of politics of inclusion, as understood as sameness, led by the principle of sameness. And this, I will say, leads also to these problems of othering. So really not really considering the other as other. And so exclusion from those regarded as kin. But of course, this is not the only way to understand kinship. Yes. And so we have the principle of interdependence and connection, mutuality, indifference. And here we can learn a lot from indigenous epistemologies and environmental humanities, especially in Australia. Here I listed some name of great thinker and activists there. And also I'm working on that also with my PhD student Lisa Ola, and it's a very interesting work to see what kind of other models of kinship we can find, understood really as these living connections, not only with non-human beings, but also with the land and the place. And here there is an article by an anthropologist that I like it very much, and Veronica Strang there is really connecting this living kindness as a way of enacting kinship within this framework of indigenous epistemologies. So here, I would say that the transition, thanks to these traditions, that is not the one that I know more, so I can just, pay homage to this and relate it to my colleagues that are working on that, and get into conviviality. So here I'm trying to do a shift through this principle of interdependence from kinship, understood as this principle of sameness, to conviviality. So this is the movement that I'm doing. And actually, Thomas Fuchs, a philosopher I admire very much, a phenomenologist and a psychiatrist, wrote this paper titled Conviviality, Our Primary Connectedness to Living Beings. And there is extremely interesting because he said that this conviviality, that is really this, living together, but also conviviality means, the convivium, so, eating together, and the kind of atmosphere it can be felt, in eating together. Imagine these, long tables all together, and this is conviviality, right? So Fuchs there is stressing that this conviviality is really grounded in our shared feeling of aliveness. So it's really grounded in embodiment and in emotions, I would say, as understood as relational concerns and stance. So Fuchs speaks in terms of intercorporeality. So there we really find these forms of conviviality that is shared among bodies living together. And he argues that this is the ground of care and commitments towards the other. And I'm also working in a very similar manner. And I understand this more from a situated perspective, I would say. So I understand this more like really living with. So this community building, being situated in a place, and by being there, sharing life with all the inhabitants of this place, human and non-humans. And I understand this living with as caring with. So this is the other movement that I'm doing. So, from kinship, if we understand this more like ruled from the principle of sameness, going to this conviviality that is the with. So not just focusing on the caring for, but in the caring with. And this caring with that is enacted in living together. And so there we really find this principle of participation that is at the ground of inaction, like really taking part in the life of the other, in caring for them. And so I would say that this is a kind opening. So I say that I really try to understand kindness as this opening to the other, the quality of the opening, because there are different ways of opening to others, The quality as this careful attention to the particular others in living together. And here, I really try to understand, this ability, so it has to do with an expertise, a mastery, a cultivation, or of, caring for all, but where this all is not like the one same, but is the each one uniquely, and specific ways to respond to each one according to their needs. Maybe this has to do with the skillful means in Buddhism. Yes, and so here we have this idea of extension, not anymore as scaling up, but as enlarging circles. This morning we spoke already about this, so there was like this communion of souls in a way without talking before meeting here. I understand these enlarging circles as not with one single center, so that they are these circles that are more like, if you want, networks of circles, but more, it's not like a scale, but you can imagine these different circles with different, size and scope, but they are networked. And so this is important to say that caring with is not necessarily dyadic, so it's not just among, between two individuals, but can be collectivized. And so here we have another quote from Joan Tronto. Caring with implies a multiplicity of participants in the act of care and requires collaboration between these actors in giving and receiving care so that people can rely upon an ongoing cycle of care to meet their caring needs. I really like also the stress that the care is ongoing. So, it is not just one single act. It's not ephemeral. So these circles are in movement. It's more like a continuum. The image is the one of the continuum. And also Joanna Macy and Chris Johnston in Active Hope, great book, they say that we grow by widening the circles of our concern. As we realize our profound connectedness, caring becomes a natural expression of who we are. So here you see this education of the character is the character that is expanding in a kind manner. So here we have this movement towards caring with, so the transition from the for to the with. And here is more like a summary. So I would say that this is a relational stance, is staying with the in-between, is the middle way, so care is mesocentric. And so in a way we'll say that the problem of the individual, so here I'm really trying to push a bit, it's not a problem. So it's not just a problem, but it might be the solution, really starting from that and really try to imagine other ways of this caring for, liberating ourselves from this, dualistic way of understanding it is just about me and you and there and etc. So it's really been in this width that the extension can take place. And these, some references both from inactions that are working more with participants and care ethics. So this has to do with a participatory ethics, so I will call this in this manner. And please, don't think that in this caring with I want to remove the caring for. So the caring for is there. And actually, in this presentation, I want to argue that the caring for is like the responsibility of the human, okay? So it really aligns with Hans Jonas' approach on responsibility, and it is really like the caring for. Although, remember this bracket that I say there is this other part that I want to explore, but for today, I'm okay to say that. But this caring for is part of a broader caring that is part of this caring with. So, I will transform Jonas' motto, say that it is not just that life can be known by life, only by life, but that life can be cared for only by life. So I really put care and ethics at the ground, also at the ground of knowing. I know that this can be controversial. I hope that we will have still the strength to discuss this. But I would say that what I want to stress is that in this kind of participatory ethics, I think that kindness can play an important role, precisely in the education of the character, in this extension, not as scaling up, but as this enlarging circle. And in that, for me, love plays a crucial role. And I just wanted to mention, since I'm Italian, before I was saying that kindness comes from kin and kinship. But in Italian, we say gentilezza, and this is the Italian translation for kindness. That comes from gentilis, gens in Latin, that is the genos in Greek, interestingly enough. And so we can say, also in the Italian gentilezza, we have this same principle that has to do with the principle of sameness. But what is added there that I really like is that there is really the explicit stress of love. And here we can find in the Italian Stil Novo poetry, so here we have even Dante and Guido Guinizelli, where it is said that actually love and the heart full of kindness are the same. So amore e il cor gentil sono una cosa. So love and the kind heart are one and the same. And here we have the other poem. Al cor gentile reimpaira sempre amore, come l'ausello in selva la verdura. Ne fe amor anti che gentil core, ne gentil core anti che amor natura. Che adesso con fu il sole, sì tosto lo splendore fu lucente, ne fu davanti il sole, e prende amore in gentilezza loco, così propriamente come calore in clarità di fuoco. So here it says that to the kind heart, love belongs to the kind heart, as the bird belongs to the forest and the leaves. And nature didn't do the love before the kind heart, and neither the kind heart before love. As for the sun, the splendor makes the brilliance is not before the sun, and it is not that the brilliance comes after the sun. And so love and kindness are in the same place, so as the warmth find in the fire clarity its home. Sorry, this was a very brief translation from the Italian from the 13th century, so it's also, from the past. And I think that this really can nourish our conversation, really bring in strongly this connection between love and kindness, as we find in the Buddhist tradition. So here I also think that we can enlarge the discussion. But I would like also to end. I think that I would need other 5 minutes, but okay, I think that is fine, 5 minutes. So with an objection, we're speaking about this extension, okay, not a scaling up, a scaling with, and even in bringing this love that belongs to the kind heart. But are we really doing this with all living beings in their uniqueness? So here we can think about, the use of antibiotics, for killing some bacteria that are in my belly, and why are we giving value more to my health than to the life of this bacteria? I think that there is some sort of silliness in this question, but we can discuss this. For now, let's just take this, as an example. The following are more interesting, I would say. So why do I give more value to certain living beings, my pets, and not others? And is this difference in treatment ethical? And so if we speak about this conviviality and this partaking, does it mean that there are some beings that are not part of my community? Are they excluded? Or should I include them, but then making them kin? So, there are so many problems there. And should I instead extend my care to all living beings? Or even be kind in killing them? So should we even understand this in this manner? And here you have 2 answers that comes more from post-humanism in art and in science. There are interesting answers to this question. I think that needed to be discussed. I'm not going to do this today. But I wanted to mention that. I wanted really to focus on the contradiction of care. So I really take these questions really as a proof of reality. So care is contradictory. So we really needed to stay with these questions. And actually, these questions play a role in the cultivation of our character. So we really need also with kindness to relate to these questions. There is this fabulous book by a colleague from New Zealand, Laura McLaughlin, Hedgehogs, Killing and Kindness. And it is about, the discussion about the introduction of predators to, reenact wilderness, and also movements that are predator-free campaigns. So there are two factions. One that you need, to kill the hedgehogs in New Zealand because there they are pests. And they are killing the birds, the native birds. But if you go somewhere else, like in the UK, they are protected species, very vulnerable. So, here you see the problem of a situated ethics. So you cannot really offer a universalized answer, And Laura was also stressing that she was really living with, these rats, snails for her whole life, and was really connected to the suffering also of this pest animal that we think that we need to kill. So her main question was, so is killing and kindness really contradictory, or should at some point kill with kindness? So I will say that this book was really instructive to me and really stressed even more that caring with is not a pacified state. So maybe it has not really to do with this harmonious state of the mind or just looking to the bright side, but has to do, with staying with the trouble, holding discomfort. And here, we have some very interesting quotes from Donna Haraway, for example. The grace of felt reason is that it is always open to reconsideration with care. So we don't have the final answer. The point is really in this process, and also keeping the discomfort or still asking this question. And I will say that the main problem has to do with this problem of polarization, wanting really to reply with a yes or a no to this question, and really finding ethics as ethical dilemmas. Everything when I teach ethics, I really refuse to teach ethical dilemmas, because I think that this really gives us a false impression of what is the ethical life. The ethical life is really challenging, is staying with this trouble, and this is making kin. So, kin is not as an ontological condition, let's say, but like a practice of getting kin, becoming kin. And so in my words, I call this, that has to do to be open to emotional friction. So I'm writing a book on emotional friction, so at the moment I really care a lot about this concept. But it's the idea, that our affective life can be a source for ethics, a source of responsibility, if we go beyond this idea of positive, negative feelings, just one emotion on the other, but really staying with this opening of the wounds, the vulnerability, with care, with kindness. So I would say that the contradiction of care is not something that needs us to say, okay, this proposal doesn't work. Actually, it's giving value to the proposal, because it stresses once again that we need really to endorse our responsibility as participants in the situation, in caring for that. So one might say, well, these frictions, vulnerability, does exclude kindness from the picture. And here, I'm also working a lot on eco-anxiety, eco-grief, all this. And also there is a research that say, oh, well, we really need to focus on our guilt and shame for what we are doing to the others, animals and the planet. So it is really an approach that can trigger also some sort of inaction in a way, or despair, not hope. And so that really goes well with kindness as this pro-social behavior. I would say that yes, there is the risk for sure, but the risk in my view is there if we understand these virtues or emotions just in an individualistic manner. So please try to see if it makes sense to you to understand them relationally, as I'm trying to argue in all this presentation. So I would say that a participatory ethics implies the need to reply to these concerns, to this question in a participatory manner, not on our own. And so I would say that it is not just my concern, it is our concern. And I would say that it is specifically in this hour that I find the value of kinship, conviviality. So, this transition to this caring with, that can be allowed by kindness, through kindness, trying to live in kindness. And I would say that living in kindness, not just simply as a peaceful and harmonious place, but despite and because of the contradiction of care. So keeping them, but being open to that with kindness. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for this very rich and engaging talk. We will have questions now. Yes, Olga.
I have a question. I love your concept of conviviality as a way to increase the circle of kindness. And in your view, how can we promote conviviality in situations where it might not be obvious? With people where we might not just naturally have dinner with? How could we go about that?
Well, if you refer in terms of educational practice, so I would say that it requires time, exercise, being there, starting to really to have this participation, etc., and also staying with the frictions. And so maybe the first dinner will not be very nice and kind, but not just give up after the first dinner or convivial moment, but keep yourself there and try to work from within also the friction and the vulnerabilities. Of course, at the beginning you might say that there might be at least some sort of intention to go to the shared table. If you don't go there, how could you do that? But there, there might be practices of try to go in to the place, not like, calling the others to join the table. I would say that this has really to do with this idea of politics of inclusion that is also problematic a lot when we think about migrants coming to a country, that they really need to learn the language, to take the customs, to take the morality, like that they are the one that need to come to the tables. Maybe this idea of enlarging circles is keeping more tables and try to create connections and way to create dialogues among these tables, So my suggestion, but in practice, I believe in interdisciplinary work. So I cannot just provide an answer. We need to speak with people, social worker, and anthropologists, and psychologists, social psychologists, and so on. But it's really try to give value to the principle of difference instead of the principle of sameness or the principle of the one and unity. That I think that this might be very problematic, and kindness really has this ability of staying with the difference and the caring with.
Curie had a question. And then Dominic. Sorry.
Thank you, Laura. That was amazing. You're so interesting. I had a similar response to Olga in the sense that I was wondering about how we extend, right? So you were distinguishing between scaling up and extending, and I was thinking about the problem of rapid modernization, for example. I was born in Korea, and I've seen what happens in a city that develops so rapidly and becomes so dense so quickly, without the time for people to develop a sense of a civic community. And I do remember just being pushed and shoved in the subway, people being very rude because I think they didn't know. They didn't acknowledge me as a human being because I wasn't in there, So and it's not these urban encounters, right? There's no opportunity to have dinner with every single person you meet, right? So we need some resources to justify extending basic care to other people. And you lived in Edinburgh, right? When I was traveling in Edinburgh, that one thing that struck me when I was a student, traveled there, people would just, if I was lost, people would stop and ask me, "Are you okay? Can I help you with something?" Right? So that kind of kindness, it takes something to develop, right? And so I wonder, like, from the models that you provided, how do we get to this, appreciation of particularity of people that we know really well, to extending some kind of kindness to people that we can really never expect to have this long-term or sustained interaction with. We just can't do that, right? So I would love to hear some more about how to fill in those gaps.
As a philosopher, maybe now I would like to reply by making the situation even more complicated, because it's even more complicated than that, unfortunately. Yes, because I really care a lot about the problem of people who has no table at all. And so now we are kind of implying that, okay, there is like, I have my table, your table, we can try to create this network, etc. But in our situation, there is a continuous loss. So just think about climate migrants who are losing their home place. They have no table, and how could I, relate to that? And there is also forced migration, that they had really to leave their island because there is floods and water everywhere. So what do they do? So I would say that this approach does not deny the need also of a global responsibility, reply also with law. So, for example, also, acknowledging that there are refugees, climate refugees, that for now the laws does not recognize their status, also in terms of passports and so on. So I'm not denying, also this level that are more like political or in law and so on. I can say that from the perspective of kindness, that is not like the solution for all, is like the specific focus of this talk. We might say that, keeping this openness and this expansive attitude already in your character is doing something that is very, very important. But I really don't want to offer an answer, because the situation is very problematic. Is really, we need a lot of different interventions. There is not just one. It is not just that kindness is the solution to this. So there is this constant problem of homelessness, ecological homelessness, that we really need to see that. And we are losing species every day. So, yes.
Sorry, Dominic was next, and then...
So the traditional way of scaling up caring for is policy, institutions, primarily welfare state, progressive tax systems, that kind of stuff. What does the concept of conviviality have to say to those institutions? Or are they completely different? I mean, they're largely impersonal, right? When I do my taxes, I feel no feelings. In fact, generally I feel bad feelings.
Irritation.
Yeah. But that money is being used in Germany's highly progressive tax system to be shunted to people who need care. Right? But I don't have the experience of the mother caring for the child. I mean, it's the complete opposite of that. So am I losing out on something in that? Or is the state losing out by not offering a more personal form of connection between my tax money and the person, my taxes and the person that I'm helping with my taxes?
You're tackling another crucial problem. And I will say that one problem is that I think that has to do also with our... maybe we were discussing this last night at dinner, I don't remember precisely, but when we were saying that we had like this idea that politics and politicians are just using us, lying to us, they are just bad people, and so on. And so, like, this distance from the political sphere. There was this discussion at the table at some point. And in a way, conviviality would say that, well, let's try to see that there are also affects there, that they are still human beings, that there are concerns there. So, for example, there is the research field on affective institutions. I think that is important. So to try to see if also our way of conceptualizing this make us too distant, too abstract, and so unrelated to us, And so conviviality will say, yes, but, there is also an embodiment of the institutions. So that there are some affects that are circulating there, also in negative manner, that, like this phenomena of affective arrangement, mind shaping, and emotional regulation there. But at the same time, could be cultivated for the good, So I think that this is what conviviality can say to this perspective. So to try to see this also from a more embodied and affect perspective, not just the abstract that has nothing to do with us, and so say, okay, this is just, this marionette that are lying to us, and stop.
Carola, did you have a question?
I think it's more a comment than a question. I just thought about your problem thinking in terms of extension as scaling up, and this division you made in hierarchies, universality and the principle of sameness and individualism, and how to keep a larger inclusive perspective. And I think from a Buddhist perspective, I mean, if you wish for all to be happy, I mean, you cannot avoid to see that we have not all the same conditions, and there are big differences among all of us. And as you mentioned, those who are facing the biggest suffering and trouble, according to Buddhist philosophy, I mean, they should receive our most compassion, the karuna. So, I mean, but I think it's important to understand then that this means that you are not impartial in the sense of upeksha, but that you are taking party for those who are of most need. This is not impartiality, it's partiality for those who are poor, who are suffering most. So you really take their side. And this is why yesterday I suggested that for upeksha, it's better to use this Allparteilichkeit, to be on all sides, with all your compassion, with all your love, So that would mean for me a real inclusion. And this is also why I referred to Martha Nussbaum, because this book of her capabilities approach starts in India with the story of a woman explaining that if you have this, what is it called, Bruttonationalprodukt, I mean, if you have this, this income per person, if this is increasing, it doesn't mean it reaches everybody, So even if the people have capabilities, they cannot live up to the capabilities because they are lacking the necessary conditions to do so. So what justice means then in a very practical way, it's not enough to go by average, but you really have to see how it reaches everybody, And in this, I think compassion and kindness really plays a big role. This is just I wanted to because I see I think we. Maybe, if I got you right, we match on this.
Yes. Thank you very much for stressing this. I think that we are on the same page. Yes, and I just wanted to stress, that also when we talk about vulnerabilities, there are different vulnerabilities. We cannot take this as a universal, and so also embodiment. Yeah. So when in conviviality we say, oh yes, we can find this sharedness because all, we were birthed from a womb and then we are going to die. But also embodiment is so different. Everybody has different needs, and so, as you say, the quality of our way to relating might be different also in terms of intensity and what you need to offer in order to reply to that needs. And so I really love how Chenrezig is represented with the 1,000 arms, with one eye in each arm. It is not just one single eye. I think that this is my problem that I have with sameness as the one, You need 1,000 of eyes, in order to reply to all these different needs, precisely because the vulnerabilities came with different powers and they change according to the situations and so on. So that's why I mentioned the skillful means that is precisely to have this capacity of really focusing on the difference and at the same time not missing, the all.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a question about the individual. It kind of is related to this, and I wondered whether the problem of the individual, in part, comes from a kind of from an extreme in the care ethics approach. If kindness, I really liked this idea that kindness is a mode of engagement, it's an ethos, then it's the way you enter into a relationship before you know the people you're relating to. And it colors how you then come to receive and understand whatever differences there might be. There was a colleague of mine at Yale and US who had fantastic, off-the-chart teaching evaluations every semester, every class. I said, what is going on? You're giving them opium or something? Like, what? And he said, I was an okay teacher before, but like many of us in that situation, you start the semester, you've got all these new young people coming in, there's a bit of trepidation about this relationship and how it's going to go and what they're going to make of you, what you're going to make of them, and, he says, and I think perhaps he had a bit of more anxiety about that than some others might. So at some point, I decided I'm going to love my students. I'm going to love them. I go into the first class, the first semester, and I know that I love them. And he meant love in the sense of, I really enjoy them. Not like that. No, he meant this love in the sense of, I care. And I think that's a really important thing that could be captured with this notion of an ethos or a mode of kindness. But he didn't know his students. And he wasn't even committed to necessarily their uniqueness, although it was a concrete relatedness. It was a presence and a being with each of them. So
yes, I like this very much, Amber. Yes, I have to say that I really like it. This is a good way to making this even more deep, because it's more like, yes, it may be a way of relating to the concrete other, but at the same time this stance that comes first, comes even before the encounter. So it's like this opening to whatever, whoever person I will meet, I will love you.
Yes.
Something like that. Yes, I really like it, and maybe this really says even more why it is an ethos. Is this ethical commitment, right? So help us also to reply to certain situationist critique, you know, like. And partiality, and maybe help even more to have this all and the different and the uniqueness together. So I think that this is a great suggestion. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that a question? Well, I'll let you have the very last question. No pressure.
So I'm just sitting with this bird that came with Lego blocks and other stuff, and just what's going on. I'd love to hear much more about it, and yeah, just my mind is boggling with trying to figure out what's. But I mean, is it care? Is it what's going on there? It can also be some sort of gift exchange or offering. Or what would I have no idea what's going on, but just. Anyway, so this is a question. Maybe you can inform me some more about what's going on with this bird doing this stuff, and then maybe it occurs to me that it would be really interesting to go into the different kinds of reciprocal relationships that are emerging here. So there's something that can be care for others in need. But then there is also kinds of giving that I really like a book by an anthropologist. Her name is Amir Mittermeier. She looks at different kinds of Islamic practices of giving, where there's both charity organizations that work a bit like caring for people in need, and sometimes people need to look at the problems of whether people then give in order to feel good about themselves, and then there are ways to work with that. And but then there are also these practices of just giving without caring, like without giving to specifically strangers or anyone, or not necessarily poor people. It can be to rich people. It could just giving to dissolve yourself in givingness or something like this. And then I was also thinking about these practices of gift exchange in traditional societies that are. It just seems to be very different ways of being with others and relating to others. It's not really a question. It's just this bird is really like putting in, like it's a kind of kind of very very strange form of. Love to understand more about that.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. I relate to this story that I like very much, so this is how I relate to that. So I don't want to say that this is the conclusive way for understanding what the bird was doing, etc. But I really understand this as an expression of this conviviality as living with. So, like that they were living in the same place, and the girl started to take care of these birds, offering stuff, and then at a certain point, this got mutual, and so I was relating this to this living with, that is more like situated and a practice and so on, and for me is very interesting, this idea of mutuality that for the care ethics tradition is not required, but it adds something to the picture that maybe was precisely also the question that I had under the brackets, but what is, I'm not the one who is caring for, but I am the one that is cared by the non-human or the earth, and so on. And this I think that is very, very crucial, because the caring for stress very much, the motivational, the effort, the active dimension of doing something. But we know that the active, the passive always comes together, So, and it's precisely also responsibility is a response. You are also receiving something. So here we would really need to bring all the tradition that has to do more, like the openness to receive the gift. That might be called grace, another way to translate charis and kindness. So there is also this line, and it will bring veil and murdoch in this, of course. And because also for receiving you need to be open. If not, you can, even receive, all the treasures, but don't see them and don't acknowledge them as treasures. So I would say that another part that needs to be developed is really integrating more this more passive that is not really passive. There is an action of opening there, but also more like a receptivity and so on. And so, yes, I agree with you that there are different ways of relating to gifting and different practices. And it is important also not to signal just one. My question today was, in these different ways of giving and offering, what are the ones that are related to kindness, that is an act of kindness? Because maybe there are other forms of giving that are not out of kindness. Right, so I didn't want just to have kindness and giving or generosity as taken as the same, precisely because there is this plurality of giving and also practices.
And with that, I would like to thank you once again, Laura.
Thank you.